Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we talked to Richie Coss about changing careers from welder to web developer. Richie trained as a fabricator and worked in that profession for a decade before he found his true calling as a front-end developer. His interest in front-end leans heavily towards the UI and CSS side of the discipline. For the past 18 months, he's worked in the northwest of the UK as a front-end contractor, whereas previously he worked as a permanent front-end developer for agencies in Manchester and Liverpool, again in the UK. So welcome to The Cynical Developer, Richie.
Thank you very much, James. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for taking time out to come and talk to us about your journey from welder to web developer or fabricator to front-end developer.
You know me, James. I love to talk. So, and you're a good man to talk to. So let's do it.
Thank you. And currently, myself and Richie work as contractors for the same client. So that's how we got to know each other. So a bit of a full disclosure there for anybody listening. So you're a front-end developer or a web developer, and that covers quite a broad spectrum of things. We mentioned in the intro that you were UI and CSS. Have you always been a UI and CSS developer?
Yeah, I think my mind works slightly different than some of our colleagues who are more JavaScript heavy developers. You know, working frameworks. We work with Vue quite a lot. Vue is a new JavaScript framework for me. I'd lean heavily on the side of the visual side of stuff. I like the quick wins, you know. Write a bit of CSS, a bit of HTML, and there it is, it's on the screen. Throw a bit of animation in, Bob Junk, and you've got the instant gratification. Whereas with JavaScript frameworks, it's a slightly more in-depth and a more involved kind of discipline. And I don't think my brain works quite well enough to become a full-on UI engineer, I suppose, for want of a better word.
Yeah, sure. It's all about that instant feedback loop. You know, I primarily do back-end development, as you know, and there can be quite a big gap between writing something and actually seeing anything actually come out of that. And I guess with doing CSS, it's either there and working on the screen or it doesn't work.
Yeah, and what I like about CSS, it's not a programmatic language. It's not like JavaScript. It's not structured in that way, and I quite like that. You know, figure things out, and it's very human readable as well, which makes it a lot easier to get to grips with very, very quickly. But when I first started off, it was tables, and I remember, I don't know if you remember a TV show called Leo Lapart.
Right. No.
He used to do a TV show on Fox years ago, like 10 or 15 years ago, and I'd been doing development maybe for about a year or two on tables using was it Macromedia back in the day?
Yeah.
You know, precursor to Dreamweaver, and I had a copy of was it Photoshop 7 or one of those older kind of precursors to Photoshop, and I saw on TV this guy who was talking about CSS and Garden and the magical things you could do without tables, and I was hooked. And like most people, I went on CSS and Garden, downloaded a load of the themes without actually realizing and understanding how they worked. So for about the first 6 months, I didn't realize you could name classes and stuff, anything you wanted. So all my classes, I remember distinctly, it was an underwater team. So I think all of my CSS work had some sort of an aquamarine kind of theme on it when you looked at the source code. But obviously then, like most things, I started learning a little bit more, and I got to grips with actually what you could and couldn't do with CSS. And I've been hooked ever since. Sure.
So, talking about Zen Garden and stuff like that, and the fact that you were using tables, you've been a front end dev for quite a while then, because I remember those days fighting with Internet Explorer 6 and the fact that CSS back then didn't really do the job cross browser. It was always something different. It never worked in IE6, but it worked okay in Firefox.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, like I first started doing, like I say, my background as a fabricator. I did that straight out of school, did my apprenticeship, worked as that, moved to Australia, worked there for 4 or 5 years doing fabrication, and a fellow I played Gaelic football with, a fellow from back home in Ireland, he was building the club's website, our Gaelic football club's website, and he asked me, could I give him a hand, because I had a laptop, and I said, yeah, sure. He was the one who gave me Macromedia, and he showed me how to do a simple little web page. And then it was just, I think everything was done in preview mode. So
Yep.
like I got tripped up so many times, with table cells and how everything worked and didn't work. And then as soon as CSS came along, it was like, wow, the freedom, it was really good. And I've gone back and looked at some of my old sites on that Wayback Machine, and
Yep.
it's not pretty, but it's still there. And it was heavily, graphics, cutting corners for rounded, border radius, stuff like that. And you were a lot of wrestling. But obviously, as a front end developer, I've done quite a few email templates recently, the last few years, and it's going back to the old days. It's a bit of a trip down memory lane a bit.
Yeah, all inline styles and as you say, tables and things having to be used for that because of the cut down version of CSS that a lot of the email web clients they use.
Well, yeah, it's because most of the email clients seem to be based on Microsoft Word from back in the day, IE6 kind of things, and it's not pretty.
No, we can't hate on them basing it on Word too much. My first website, my first website of any worth was actually made in Microsoft Word and saved as website in that.
Well, I suppose I can't laugh. I remember, when I was doing my apprenticeship, they were offering, is it the European Computer Driving License?
Yeah, I have an ECDL as well.
ECDL, of course. Yep. I don't, James, and which is why whenever a spreadsheet comes up, I haven't a clue. I'm like, how do I make this cells? What? It's not. And there's a place for those skills, but like my computer literacy before I got into web development was zero. I didn't even have a Gmail account. I barely browsed the web. Like, this is early 2000s.
Yeah. So
I'd never really had a love or a want to get into it. But it's like most things in life, serendipity, you kind of just fall into it.
Yeah.
But like being a fabricator, I didn't want to be a fabricator. It's just my sister's boyfriend at the time. He was a fabricator, and where he worked, they offered me an apprenticeship. I went, yeah, why not? I had nothing else to do just after school.
Yep.
Same thing as a web developer. I just kind of fell into it, and sometimes the things that you don't know are there for you are probably the best.
Yeah. I think that's how I ended up in this route as well. Actually, I obviously didn't go down the fabrication route, but I did a lot of stuff with graphics and little add-ons and that for games like Toka Touring Cars and Unreal Tournament and stuff like that, and trying to put those online. And then it just sort of came around that, I need a website, I need a better website, or I need a website with a database and stuff like that. I fell into that way. But unlike yourself, you're saying you didn't have an interest in computers as such. I had an interest in computers. I just wanted to draw pretty pictures more than write code.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say that I wouldn't have an interest in it. It's just the interest wasn't there to be facilitated because, I grew up with consoles and stuff as a kid, and, like an Amstrad 464 and stuff like that, kind of small little bits and pieces, but I never did like basic or anything, I never did little coding challenges. That was never my interest.
Sure.
But I suppose something just kind of clicked once I saw what you could do. You can make pretty things move on a page, and that's what I've been chasing ever since.
Yeah. So, being a developer, everything seems to be around all these abbreviations and fancy words and that. But I think we mentioned it a couple of times, which is the word fabricator and fabrication, that people may not actually understand or know what that is. Could you explain to the listeners what that is?
Yeah, in its simplest form, it's taking a sheet of metal or steel and manipulating it to be anything like bending it or cutting it or welding it, or anything that involves steel or steel work or welding is probably fabrication. And it's a dirty job. It's a great job. It's a rewarding job, but it's not for the faint-hearted. You're out in all weathers. You're in cold workshops. It's a lot of dust. It's very smoky, but it's an honest trade. Yeah. And I enjoyed it while I did it. Yeah. But I couldn't see myself doing it into my 50s or 60s. I'd seen too many guys with bad hips, bad knees, bad lungs from years of just abuse. This heavy work. So I said I'd go sit in a chair for 8 hours.
Yeah. Well, from that description, working with CSS and fabrication, they've got a lot of similarities, haven't they? No, not really.
They do, James. They're very, very similar. Well, not really, but it's the underlying. It's like any sort of a trade or a craft. it's having the key skills to, the basic skills and building from there. Being a fabricator, you can just be a fabricator who bends steel, who cuts steel, and then you progress on to be a fabricator who ends up getting coded as a welder. It becomes I was a positional stainless steel pipe welder, and there was codes in that, and it was quite a tricky job, quite a skilled job, but you don't do that from day one. Same thing as a developer, you can jump straight in to learn a framework, but you're going to skip out on all the fundamental stuff, like your HTML and your CSS and semantics and everything goes with that. And that seems to be the way at the moment. There seems to be a lot of kind of skipping step one. Same thing in fabrication. Like if you skip step one, you end up kind of not fully understanding everything that goes with the job, and it kind of catches up with you later on, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that started a little while ago with people in development sort of coming along and using jQuery, and everybody would jump in and go, "Oh, I know JavaScript because I know jQuery," and they don't understand JavaScript. So when jQuery went wrong, they didn't really know what was going on, and then when jQuery fell out of favor, out of fashion, they were then a little bit stuck, and it was back to the drawing board again because they had to then learn JavaScript.
Well, that's it. It's like I found learning Vue, like I would never have been a great JavaScript developer. Still, I'm not a great JavaScript developer. Again, as I said earlier on, my head or my mind doesn't work in that sort of way. And I find, jQuery was just easy to get into, but I still struggle to get into it because, again, you need to know the fundamentals of JavaScript. And coming onto frameworks like Vue, which we work with, you still don't really need to know the fundamentals of JavaScript. It's a bit weird. You can jump in with it and, you can read all the documentations. From my point of view, maybe I'm just, doing myself a disservice about how much JavaScript I know, but it just seems like frameworks, they just seem to, come and go. And we've got our key ones, obviously, with Vue and React and Angular, and the entry level on them's lower than perhaps, just writing vanilla JavaScript.
Yeah. I'm obviously a .NET Dev, and I often refer to it as pretend programming because a lot of it's done for you already, and these frameworks facilitate a lot of that as well. There's a lot of stuff that's done for you, just to try and help you along that path to do things a lot quicker. And yeah, there are people out there that don't bother to try and work out and understand what's going on behind those pieces that they're sticking together like Lego bricks.
Well, that's it. But sometimes in our industry, if it works, it works. Ship it.
Yeah.
There is that, and it's we know we've all worked in contracts or in agencies or wherever, and it's just get the work done, get it out there, and to hell with the future. And the future will never catch up with you, but it always does.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
Or if it's not your problem, be somebody else's problem.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you got into the web development sort of sphere purely by accident because somebody asked you to help them with a website. Did you go and do any formal training, anything like Bootcamps or anything like that to help you make that transition from welder to web developer?
Yeah, so basically, I left Australia in the mid-2000s, and I met my now current wife out there, and she was coming back. She's English, and she was coming back to the Northwest, and I'd been doing fabricating for about 10 years, and I didn't see myself doing it for much longer. And I don't even know if you remember, James, there was a recession in the 2000s, and when I came back to the UK, we set up in Manchester, there wasn't much fabricating work going around, so I enrolled in a 3-year web development course at Manchester Metropolitan University.
Okay.
So I've got a BSc honours degree in web development, and it was a great course. I really enjoyed it. The tutors there were very, very good. But the key thing I did on that course was I got a job at an agency and worked all the way through those 3 years for this agency, and that stood to me. As good as universities are, they're limited in what they can teach and the syllabus they can teach, and they're very aware of the limitations of these courses. And I had a very good tutor called Richard Eskins, and Richard was always encouraging us to go off and, learn outside of the job, outside of the course. So I took that on, and I took on other little bits of work while I was working away. And again, you know what it's like, James, when you first start in something, you think you know most of it until you start learning a bit more.
Yep.
We had a conversation about this the other day, and you kind of realize how little you actually know the more you learn. And it was learning in smaller agencies and stuff that kind of, you know, taught me I suppose, let's call them the soft skills for, you know, a job in development.
Yeah, and I think that piece there where you went out and you actually worked in a real agency while doing your degree. I think a lot of people miss out on that. I didn't get to do that as part of my computer science degree, and I think what they teach you in university is so out of date because the industry moves so quickly. It's not possible for them to teach you the latest and greatest stuff that's out there. So you go through your degree, you do all this work, you come out into the real world and go, right, I'm ready now, I know what I'm doing. And it turns out you haven't got a damn clue what you're doing.
Well, that's it. And I remember having a conversation with Richard, and while I was at ManMet, or maybe it might have been after, and he was saying there was, I don't know if you remember back in the day, there was a couple of guys from the University of Ulster in Coleraine called the Standardistas.
Right,
And
okay.
they used to run a course, and their course was more flexible. They used to teach kind of like key skills, you know, like current kind of skills, you know, workplace skills. So if it had been today, to be learning React or Vue or whatever the framework of the day would be. But as Richard always told me, the universities work on like 4 or 5 year cycles.
Yep.
So they get signed off, and obviously the curriculum gets signed off. And if something new comes out in that time, it's up to them to try and shoehorn it in, but it wouldn't be a module that they could actually teach, or it didn't seem like it would be a module that they could teach. It was just something that would be taught alongside it as an extra skill. But we were always encouraged to go off and learn. But the key things that I got from there was just the core stuff like accessibility, you know, proper semantics, all this stuff.
Yeah.
We were well versed in Jeffrey Zellman, kind of, and all of his kind of his outlook on how the web should be.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before about the fabrication, you know, you've got to know the basics to get the more advanced stuff. And they teach you, or they lecture you in university on the core things, and it's up to you to go out and learn stuff outside of that. I think I felt a little bit lucky with some stuff in that sense from my degree courses that Microsoft came around because .Net was just coming out. It was very new. They did a bit of an expo for us on .NET, and one of our courses, I think in the second year, then gave us the option. You didn't have to do it in .NET, but you could use .NET to do your coursework, which was pretty good. And I know my dissertation was actually written in .NET, in Visual Basic .NET for my sins. So I did get that chance, but I do know people who work in the educational industry, and they do say that, you know, all this stuff that comes out, it does take a long time for that to actually filter through and get signed off by the boards and then become part of the actual curriculums for what they teach and what they lecture on.
Yeah, and I think a good part of the university experience was Richard used to bring in, you know, kind of quote unquote web celebs, you know, the kind of well known people like, say, Andy Clark.
Yeah.
And then we'd have people like Dan Donald and Rich Clark who used to run a couple of meetups or a couple of I suppose small little conferences back in the day, and these were really good, you know, just for someone who was keen getting into community, you know, a good little networking exercise. So you kind of got to know the people in the industry. And Manchester is quite a big pool of people, but quite a small kind of, you know, core group of people as well. It was always nice just to go out and see faces, because, you know, chances are when you're in university with people, not all of those people are as interested in the fundamentals as you are.
Yeah, definitely. You know, mixing with like-minded people at the events and that you go to the meetups. So something that wasn't around when I was in university and wouldn't have been around, I wouldn't have thought, for yourself, was bootcamps. Do you have an opinion on those? It's something that's very new, I think, for the UK. They're quite big over in the States, but they are popping up now over here.
Yeah, I think bootcamps are a great idea. Like the idea of bootcamps are great. They're a good business model. I would like to have a cut of some of the money from it. I assume it's quite lucrative. But what I feel from it is, there's perhaps they do set unrealistic expectations for some of these people who go on them. I know one guy, he's a friend of a friend, and he had issues with his hands. He had to give up, coincidentally, being a fabricator, and I think he did a boot camp, and it was like a 12-week boot camp, and I think some of them guarantee you interviews or guarantee you jobs out of it. Obviously, they've got like sister companies or whatever they farm people out to. Sorry, not farm, but they pass people on to. And yeah, some of the junior salaries that come out of it seem to be, or the expectations come out of it seem to be quite high. For some of us that came up on pretty low junior wages.
Yeah.
And I suppose I'm quite envious, I suppose, that maybe as a junior developer you could start off at 35 grand or something, or some of these numbers that I hear. But Manchester really needs it, especially because as you know yourself, there's more jobs, especially in the front end side of things, than there are people to fill those jobs.
Yeah.
But my only concern is that, and I've seen it when I've worked with people come out of boot camps, are really, really good at one specific thing.
Yeah.
And they to the detriment of the basics, as we were saying earlier on about semantics, HTML, CSS, and I don't think these boot camps, they don't have the time to teach the fundamentals. I'm sure someone will come back and say I'm totally wrong, but it's just from my experience and from what the people I've met who've come out with them, they're very, very well-rounded developers, but they're very, very developed in their specific kind of specific role.
Sure. Yeah. So,
but there is a need for it, definitely.
Yeah. So, making that transition from fabricator to developer, was that an easy transition for you, or was it a very, very sort of big leap in your thought processes and the way that you approach things?
I would like to say yes, it was a very, very big, but I don't usually give much thought to things. I'm quite impulsive. And I kind of like, it was something I really wanted to do, and I probably jumped into it without thinking, right, I'm giving up a career that I've been doing for 10 years, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to the bottom and start my way up.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those things. Do you want to chase money and be unhappy, or just be happy doing what you do, and then the money will come after, or whatever? Lucky enough, I was in a good position. My wife works; she was fine, so we weren't, I wasn't starting out from, I wasn't on the breadline or anything.
Yeah.
But making the leap, no, I'd already switched off from my career, in my head, about a year or two, previous, and I knew at some stage I was going to make a change to do something. What I was going to do, I didn't know, and lucky enough, that's probably why I jumped on the whole web development thing.
Yeah.
And also then, the good thing was then, once I gave up the job, I had 3 years of university to kind of to adjust to a new lifestyle.
Yeah, and making that transition is quite a scary one. I know I fell out of love with development a few years ago, and I looked around at what else I could do, and the prospect of having to go back to the very bottom of the pile and work my way up again was scarier than not having the money in my pocket.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's a very brave thing to do is to make that change, but as you are, you're proof that you can do it.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot easier obviously to do these things in your 20s than in your 30s or 40s. You've got, before you have kids and a wife and stuff like that. But I would still, like, if I found something I loved now that wasn't fabric or wasn't developing, I would probably make the same decision again.
Sure.
I'm not in it for the money.
Yeah,
the money's nice, but it's not my main goal. My main goal is just to do something that I enjoy doing. And I think once you have that, it makes a big difference. And we work on things, and people work on things that is in their chosen kind of profession that used to be their hobby. And there's days that you just don't want to do it because X, Y, or Z. But then you look back at the days that I was in a ditch or in a hole, digging out stuff, getting ready to fabricate, putting in foundations or something, or you're in a tank and you're smoke everywhere, and you come out and there's black steel dust everywhere on you, and you're just filthy.
Yeah. And
you look back at that and you go, yeah, there's worse things than sitting on a chair for 8 hours a day in front of a screen.
Yeah. The worst injury you're going to give yourself is repetitive strain injury or a carpal tunnel.
Well, that's it. And lucky enough, I've not been developing long enough to have those bad injuries just yet.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just not using the mouse correctly. So.
Or maybe you're using it correctly. I've had RSI a couple of times.
Well, James, I've seen all your ergonomic stuff, so I don't know how you could be in any way injured.
That's the whole reason I have an ergonomic keyboard and ergonomic mice and all that now is to battle that.
Yeah.
And but it's definitely not running the gauntlet of metal work at all.
No, but again, it's you offset that sitting on a chair all day is obviously there's sitting down isn't good for you. And being up walking all day was good for you, but swings and roundabouts.
Yeah. We focus very much there on the negative parts of the careers, but are there some positive differences?
Yeah, the positive differences are that I suppose you can. As a fabricator, it was a lot harder to kind of work for yourself. There was a lot of overhead involved. If I wanted to go out and set up my own, I'd need a van.
Yep.
I'd need all the tools. I'd need welding machines. I'd need to buy the supplies and all this sort of stuff. As a developer, all I need is a computer.
Yep.
And a bit of internet, and away you go. So there's that, that aspect. So it was a lot easier for me to set up my own company than it would have been I could have set up my own company, obviously, as a fabricator, but then the overhead that comes with it would just, you're in a hole already. Yeah, whereas now as a developer, all I needed, as I say, was a computer and some internet, and away we go. And lucky enough, I made some good connections as a developer, and contracts. There's quite a lot of them around in Manchester at the moment.
Yeah. So you mentioned there the abundance of jobs. And earlier you were saying that you worked for an agency as part of your university course. How did you land your first development job? Was that the agency that you'd worked for during uni, or was it something else?
So basically, when I was at uni, I I googled Manchester web development agencies, and I must have emailed 50, for a number, and only one got back to me. And they were called Frank Design I think they were Ancode, somewhere on the outskirts of Manchester, just right on the edge of the city. Really good guy. He's a guy called Alex Moran. And he brought me in, had a chat, put me to work. It's only a really small setup. There was like 2 or 3 guys. And I started working there, just thrown straight in at the deep end, doing some PHP, everybody's favourite coding language. So I was doing that. I was working on coding writer stuff, but it was mainly for the front end kind of CSS, HTML. But it gave me such a good understanding, especially on shoestring budgets and stuff like that, tight deadlines.
Yeah. And
they're the same sort of the same kind of soft skills that you bring across, just how to deal with clients, how to take on workloads and kind of assess how long they're going to take, then have that estimate cut in half and then work to that kind of time estimates.
Yeah, I think it's one of those badges of honours and one of those things that you've got to do before you can call yourself a developer. I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and the conversation did spread into Twitter, which was, have you broken any live servers and stuff? And it's one of those that if you've not actually broken something fundamental in live, can you call yourself a developer? And I think if you've never worked in an agency, you can never tell me how difficult it is to work to tight deadlines unless you've done that sort of work.
Well, that's it. I remember like they gave me live access to the FTP, which is how we got stuff up onto the server, and being not that way inclined, I'll delete a folder here, delete a folder there. What could go wrong? Next thing you know, clients on the phone, where's my website? It was never my fault, obviously, But yeah, you're right. And working to tight deadlines, I quite enjoy working to tight deadlines. It gives you a kind of a focus. Otherwise, I'm a very, very good procrastinator. I'll end up, and then when I left university was finished. I applied for first job I interviewed at was a place called Building Blocks in Manchester. They're now called Depth Design and Technology, I think. First interview there. I got that and straight into work from that, and I worked there for about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah,
it's a good place to work as well, and they're still going strong in Manchester.
Cool. So, is there anything you actually miss about being a fabricator?
I miss the tangible side of it. Like what we do is very, very intangible, if that's a word.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing we can hold. We can see it, but we can't hold, and it doesn't seem to have a longevity. When I was driving to work a couple of months ago, I was driving along the motorway and I saw a trailer in front of me, and when I was doing my fabrication apprenticeship, I worked for an engineering works who made brackets and stuff for trailers.
Yeah.
And it was that brand of trailer that I'd driven past. So that was like 20 years ago. So potentially I could have made something that was on that trailer that I just drove past, and I was driving to a job, and the code I'm writing will probably not be there in a year's time, 2 years' time. So there's that kind of there's no legacy. Not that I had a legacy as a fabricator, but there was a tangible thing that we made it. You could hold it with your hands, and you could actually, you could say, oh, I made that. Whereas now we can point to a website and say, oh yeah, I helped build that. But then 6 months later, that's redesigned or it's done something else, and your input of that is gone. That's probably the only thing I miss about it. And also, being out in the sunshine when the weather's good. And I suppose the opposite of that then is the winter when it's cold. So I don't miss that bit of it. But I miss just being able to hold what we do. Not to get too deep on you, James. But
it's I get that quite well, and trying to explain to people what it is that we do, because everything is so abstract that they don't really understand it. I tell people, oh, I make websites, I build software, and they say, what do you mean you make websites and you build software? How can you make a website? And say, well, they don't grow organically and just suddenly pop up. Somebody's got to do something, and they always look at it like front page or using PowerPoint or Microsoft Word, and go, well, you just drag and drop stuff on there, don't you?
Well, that's it. Like, anytime people ask me, I hate when people ask me what I do when I say I'm a developer, a web developer, and then they look at you and go, could you do me a website for... And I'm like, oh, no, I don't do that. That's not what I do. There's a lot more to it than that. Like, you have to explain the disciplines of what you do, and then you hear yourself saying it out loud, and you're like, shut up, Richie, because they don't care. They just see a website as a website, something that they see in front of them. They don't see all the bits that go into it. Whereas if I was a mechanic, I could say I'm a mechanic. I deal with engines. I do body work. I do something. It's a lot more. People can kind of focus on it.
Yeah,
but what we do,
it's more
I make a website. Yeah, it's like if I say I did X or Y website, I was like, oh really? And I was like, yeah, well, I only did the bit you can see. I didn't do the underlying code of it, and they don't really care about that. So that's one good thing about being a front-end developer. You can take all the credit for a website that you see, whereas you back-end developers, you kind of just do the messy kind of mining work, and we'll take all the glory.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that I've done that's been API work in the back end that's run some massive systems worldwide, but nobody will ever see that and ever understand that that's there. And you were saying about stuff is only around for a year. I think there was only one project that I worked on maybe 12 years ago that was still around up until I think last year, maybe the year before. But that's the longest lived piece of work I've ever done. A lot of stuff comes in, gets used for 2 or 3 years, and then they bring someone else in, or technology changes and they do something else better with it.
Yeah. Oh, without doubt, and that's exactly what we need to keep us in a job, is for refactoring of everything, rebuilding. If everybody just kept onto everything and there was no expiry date on it, there'd be a lot less jobs, there'd be a lot less prospects for us. So in that respect, as much as I'd like to have something tangible, I'm quite glad that what we have has an expiry date on it. Yeah,
keeps food on our table, which is good.
Well, that's it, and technology on our tables as well, James.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Definitely. So to sort of round all this off, for anybody out there that has friends that are maybe looking to make the jump, or they're listening to this podcast, to try and find out a little bit more about development, what key bits of advice would you give them to help them on their journey of becoming a developer?
Well, I was going to speak from a front-end point of view, which is what I can only talk for. I would say learn the fundamentals. We find in this industry, accessibility is kind of skipped over. It's getting a lot better now, and accessibility gets thrown out before everything else. If it should be our fundamental thing, not having a closed web. Just learn how to mark stuff up properly. Learn HTML, please. Just learn HTML.
Yeah.
learn where you can actually use it, and then on top of that, learn CSS. Whether that's just basic CSS or you want to learn Sass or less, or whatever, and then move on and then start learning the fancier frameworks, because there's no point in learning a framework without learning the underlying kind of ways it gets put together. Otherwise, you're just going to have a very very kind of strange career. I'm sure you'll be very, very happy in what you do, but I'm a purist. I just like to see things written correctly and then stuff bolted on after.
Yeah.
So I say just learn and soak up as much as you can. Just go out, see a website you like, inspect element, see how it's marked up. Pull down that CSS, do like I do, steal from some website, and then just learn 6 months later that you can change the class names.
Yeah.
And it's all part of the learning curve. The more you learn, the more you realize the more you have to learn. And I think that's a good way to view it, is just do as much as you can with it as well. Do as much kind of outside of the job, or outside of your learning, wherever you're doing it, and just build stuff and break stuff. And I suppose, which is a mantra of where we work at the moment, is fail fast.
Yeah.
Again, we work somewhere where nobody's going to die if you break stuff. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. We're not writing life support software, so it's good. Get things out and learn from your mistakes. I think everything in technology, especially in the areas that we work in, is make mistakes, learn from your mistakes, and always take that forward.
Well, that's it. And especially if you come in to do a placement somewhere, don't listen to that guy who he thinks he knows it all. He gets angry if you break stuff. He was just like you once. He was probably worse than you. He's probably angry with you because he sees himself in you, or she sees herself in you. And it's just do it, just break it, and don't be afraid to hold your hand up if you break something. Yep. There should be no culture of blame. It's just, if we break something, let's fix it. Let's figure out what the issue is. I was just saying, unless you're in there, if they give you access in the first week of your career to live, AWS settings or something, or server settings, that company needs to take a good look at itself. It's not your fault if you break stuff. Yeah,
it's definitely down to them. Yeah,
it's definitely down to them.
And on that massive bombshell, to steal a quote from another show, thank you for
Friends.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Thank you for spending the time with us this evening and sharing your journey into web development.
It's been a pleasure, James. It's just worth it to hear your radio voice.
Yeah, it's very, very different from my day-to-day voice, as some of you out there will know.
Less of a Welsh accent, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And
thanks very much for having me, James.
Yeah, not a problem. And thank you to everyone out there for listening to The Cynical Developer. I'm James Studder, and you've been listening to Richie Coss talking about moving from a welder to a web developer. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help The Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.